So I don't usually do news updates on movies. My channel is mostly about video games and what have you, but in light of the last video that I uploaded, which involved Sony and Spider-Man, Sony's acquisition of Insomniac, which developed the highly acclaimed Spider-Man game for PS4, I figured maybe I should talk about this. Now, first things first, let's get something out of the way. Sony Interactive Entertainment is different from Sony Pictures. Sony Interactive is video games and what have you. Sony Pictures is movies. So Interactive had nothing to do with, this whole ordeal with the MCU, all of this that's going on right now. So just something to keep in mind. Now let's talk about what's been making so many headlines right now. So this information comes from Deadline. This was a report that they started with this article with a headline that reads, Disney-Sony standoff ends Marvel Studios and Kevin Feige's involvement in Spider-Man. So they're kind of declaring this. The article reads, exclusive, Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige won't produce any further Spider-Man films because of an inability by Disney and Sony Pictures to reach new terms that would have given the former a co-financing stake going forward. So they're basically saying this is a done deal, that Spider-Man is officially out of the MCU, but reports after this and sources from various other outlets indicate that this may not actually be a done deal, that there may be hope yet, that there may still be negotiations. But what Deadline is saying here is, quote, a dispute that has taken place over the past few months at the top of Disney and Sony has essentially nixed Feige and the future involvement of Marvel from the Spider-Man universe, sources said. And then from there, the article talks about what the deal is all about, why negotiations allegedly broke down. Here's what the article said. Sources said there are 2 more Spider-Man films in the works that are meant to have director Jon Watts and Tom Holland front and center, though Watts doesn't have a deal for the next picture. Unless something dramatic happens, Feige won't be the lead creative producer of those pictures. This is a lot of webbing here, but it all comes down to money. Of course it freaking does. And it's easy to understand why both sides refuse to give ground. Disney asked that future Spider-Man films be a 50-50 co-financing arrangement between the studios, and there were discussions that this might extend to other films in the Spider-Man universe. Sony turned that offer down flat, and I don't believe they even came back to the table to figure out a compromise. Led by Tom Rothman and Tony Vinciquerra, Sony just simply didn't want to share its biggest franchise. Sony proposed keeping the arrangement going under the current terms where Marvel receives in the range of 5% of first dollar gross, sources said. Disney refused. And then there's an update here that says that Sony insiders counter that Rothman did offer compromises, but Disney declined. So, look, I'm not gonna claim to understand the stuff that goes on behind the scenes and claim which one way is better than the other, which deal is more fair than the other. Frankly, I'm not gonna side with either Sony or Disney. Like, I'm not gonna feel sympathy for multi-billion-dollar corporations having a dick measuring contest for money. I mean, the best we can hope for as fans of Spider-Man is that they work something out, and that the MCU Spider-Man can continue while Sony can make their own Spider-Man stuff like Into the Spider-Verse and, the Venom movie and all these different things. If both entities can benefit from Spider-Man and fans can benefit from, getting all these Spider-Man films and products, I mean, that's the win-win solution, right? So my sympathy goes out to Spider-Man fans who were looking forward to seeing where things would go after Far From Home, which I thought was an excellent movie. And, for the creators who are actually passionate about creating more Spider-Man stories and bringing them to cinematic life, I want a solution, a compromise that will ultimately allow as many parties as possible to take the Spider-Man license and bring their own creativity to it. That's just my take on it. As far as the corporate stuff going on behind the scenes, I don't know, fuck both Sony and Disney. Let them fight it out, but again, fingers crossed that this all kind of pans out. Now, Deadline saying this is a done deal. They also added, sources said Disney's top brass for the past several months has sought new terms for Feige and the Marvel cross-pollination to continue. As the Spider-Man relationship grew, Feige and Sony Pictures chief Tom Rothman spoke about the possibility of a wider involvement in the Sony-controlled Spider-Man universe, which contains 900 characters. It is understandable that the fiscally shrewd Rothman would balk at giving up half of Sony's biggest franchise to Marvel. After all, Marvel already owns the merchandising on Spider-Man. Does the mouse really need half of the movie universe also? Sony, so far, has decided that as valuable as Feige is, Disney is asking too high a price. Sources said that Sony reasoned that they will be fine without Feige. The creative template has been set on the Spider-Man films, and Watt and Holland are in place along with Amy Pascal, who became producer with Feige after she exited the executive suite after presiding over the previous Spider-Man iterations, directed by Sam Raimi and Mark Webb as Sony Pictures chief. So basically, Disney wants more money, and so that's causing sort of a rift and a bit of contention between the two companies in regards to how to proceed moving forward. And from what I understand, if this deal were to fall apart, there would still be 2 more Spider-Man movies with Tom Holland, but the continuity would be put into question because those movies would no longer be tied to the MCU, so they wouldn't be able to reference the Marvel movies and its characters and its story developments. I don't know if these Spider-Man movies would be direct sequels to Far From Home, or if they would diverge and do something completely different. Like, it's just, I don't know how this is all gonna pan out. Like, yes, Tom Holland is returning, but in terms of the narrative integrity and the continuity of everything, that's gonna get lost in transition. Now, while Deadline is presenting this whole ordeal like Spider-Man MCU is officially done, other outlets have reached out to their own sources and they're claiming different things. So with Variety, for example, they said, one source said that a deal might still be reached between Disney and Sony. Disney is believed to have expressed concerns that Feige was spread too thin due to other Marvel projects plus original projects for Disney+. And then here's an article from website IGN. Their original headline read, Spider-Man out of the MCU if Marvel, Sony can't reach deal. And then the article got updated after IGN's own sources echoed what Variety sources said about how this isn't over. IGN's article says this, one source has informed IGN that negotiations are ongoing. Meanwhile, a separate source tells IGN that Deadline's initial report is accurate. So there's a lot of conflicting stories here. Some sources are saying one thing, other sources are saying another. The fact of the matter is that we don't know what the heck is going on. We don't know if talks have broken down completely. I think it's prudent to wait maybe a couple days until Marvel and Sony and whatever entities make a proper official announcement before declaring that MCU Spider-Man is dead. But I hope that's not the case. I've read different things, different opinions about what people think in terms of the way Spider-Man is represented in the MCU. I really enjoy it. I've been having a blast with all the recent Spider-Man movies. As I said before, the best outcome is if both Sony and Marvel can mutually benefit from the Spider-Man franchise. You know, if they can both create content for fans, if they can both add their own expression, their own artistic vision to this iconic character. You know, I enjoy both MCU and stuff like the Spider-Verse, Into the Spider-Verse animation movie, or the Sam Raimi movies I love as well. Basically, I say the more the merrier, and if this deal breaks down, the fact of the matter is that Spider-Man fans are going to get less content moving forward. It's all going to be controlled by Sony, who owns the rights to Spider-Man films because Marvel sold Sony the rights back in, it says right here, it wasn't until 1999 when Marvel finally reclaimed the film rights, which it then sold to Sony Pictures for a reported $7 million. Keep in mind that at the time, superhero movies weren't as big of a deal as they are now, because just the quality was very bad back then. The special effects couldn't keep up with the requirements to create these super fantastical superhero films. But obviously technology has caught up, and superhero movies, the storytelling has gotten more refined and more nuanced. They've become just a worldwide phenomenon. And so, you know, it's easy to look at $7 million back then and be like, are you crazy, Marvel? But back then, this was kind of where superhero movies were at. They just weren't a big deal at the time. And I'm sure looking back now, Marvel regrets this decision, because Sony's made far more than $7 million since the acquisition of rights. But yeah, Marvel at the time was in a rough place, which is why they started selling rights left and right. And it's only now that they've started reacquiring some of them. But Sony is not going to let go of Spider-Man. It's just such a huge IP that they can profit from. It's all about money. So it'll be interesting to see how this all ultimately pans out. I'm not sure what to believe because, again, the different sources are saying different things. It's just hard to come up with any concrete conclusions based on the information we have now. All I can say is, again, I have no sympathy for either corporation. I think we shouldn't be taking sides with any of these two companies because they don't care about you. They just don't. Let's put it that way, all right? They don't care whether fans get Spider-Man or not. The executives of these companies, all they care about is financial bottom line. They're not going to do what's best for fans of the series and for the creators who are passionate about bringing the character to life. They don't care about the art. They care about the money they can make by using the art as a vehicle. And sure, look, I get it. They're a business and all that, but they make enough money as it is, and whichever deal they pick, these companies are not going to go bankrupt. There's just no need to feel sorry for either of them. Allow me to play the world's smallest violin for either of them, regardless of what deal ultimately pans out. Disney's already making so much freaking money from the entire MCU franchise, from the Star Wars and all of the Pixar movies and whatever it is, everything that they own right now. They own so many properties and they've raked in so much cash as it is. Missing out on the 50-50 deal that they're proposing with Sony, it's not going to bring them down in any way. And same thing with Sony. They've got multiple endeavors. This is a huge company that just, if they accept Marvel's deal, the company will certainly not go under. They'll be fine. But it's just about, getting as much money as possible, trying to push the financial guidance as much as possible. As of right now, I think it's safe to say that this Disney-Sony deal is in some form of jeopardy. Whether it falls through completely or whether they can find some kind of resolution, we probably should wait a little bit. So anyway, there you have it, folks. My take on the whole Spider-Man MCU situation. As an avid fan of Spider-Man, yeah, it sucks to contemplate the possibility that the MCU Spider-Man may just come to an abrupt end. I'm personally hoping for the continuation of MCU Spider-Man, as well as the continuation of Sony's endeavors. Let us know in the comments below what your take is on the whole situation, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, and I guess once in a while if movie updates here and there if it's a nerdy enough topic. Stay tuned right here on Yong Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Yong out.